This tutorial is to help you piece a word panel into template M of the Fussy Cut Thimbles pattern. Most of the blocks within that pattern have the Fussy Cut area in section 1, which makes it really easy to piece. But on this one, it's on section 6, so you have some piecing to do before that, and then the word panel section is at an angle, which makes it slightly trickier. But we have some tips to help you. For this technique, I use a light box as well as a transparent cutting mat. Makes it easier because you can cut right on the light box. These cutting mats are quite expensive, and if you can't access one, you can often find these kitchen cutting mats that are very thin and you can see through them enough, and they're usually just a couple of bucks either at a dollar store or a kitchen store. My plan for this block is to fussy cut this word stitch, which I got from this fabric that I designed years ago at Spoonflower. It's called Quirky Idioms fabric, and it was designed specifically for fussy cutting. The dotted lines are 1 inch apart, so it's perfectly designed for a 1/2 inch fussy cut of all these fun little quirky idioms, and often you can just find a really good word in there. So we're going to start by cutting the seam allowance on the side of the fabric that is going to be attached to the seam between sections 5 and 6. And because it's going to be stitched on the bottom side of the word stitch, we're actually going to put the piece of fabric upside down on the light box. That'll make it easier for us to trim the seam allowance with the add a quarter ruler. And then position it in place for section 6 on the template. Then fold the template along the seam line and trim the seam allowance on that edge, which is at the bottom of the word. Then we do a quick check just to make sure that everything looks good. And the reason that we've cut this piece 6 before we've pieced 1 to 5 is because if we were doing it after we pieced 1 to 5, the seam allowance coming up from 5 to 6 would be in the way and it would make it harder for us to see what we were doing. So this just made it a little bit easier. So now that the fussy cut word is prepped, we're ready to go ahead and piece those sections 1 to 5. And then because of the bulk that comes to a point in the middle, I actually run a basting stitch down the bottom, and that just holds everything nicely together. Okay, so now we're ready to attach the fussy cut word into section 6. So I'm going to give you a few techniques for positioning it. You don't have to do all these steps. It is a little over the top to do all of them, but experiment with them and then use the techniques that work for you. I start by measuring the width of section 6, which is 1.5 inches, so I make a pencil mark of 3/4 inches. And then I fold my fussy cut word in half, checking on the light box to see where the two ends are, and make a little finger press mark where that halfway mark is. So one thing to be aware of here is that because you're joining these two pieces at an angle, the halfway marks on both pieces of fabric that are on the edge of the fabric are not going to give you the right point. You need it to be the halfway mark on the seam allowance line, so sort of 1/4 inch down from the edge. So I mark it on the edge of the fabric, and then I just work out where that little line is if I go down by 1/4 inch. And it's that point on both pieces that is going to be our point we're trying to match up. For the next technique for making sure the placement of the fussy cut is perfect, we need to make sure that you've trimmed the seam allowances all the way around the part that you've already pieced. So that's sections 1 to 5, because those trimmed edges give us the information needed for the placement. You start by laying the fussy cut word right side down and then lay the template on top of it. The template is right side up, so the template and fabric are wrong sides together. Then fold the template along the seam line that you're about to sew. So that's the line between sections 5 and 6. And just check that the placement of the word is nicely centered inside that section 6. Fold the template over on the line and then rotate it 180 degrees so that you have your top edges lined up nicely. And then mark the angles on the left and right sides of the pieced section, making the marks on the fussy cut word piece of fabric. Okay, we're ready to roll. Now lay your template with the fabric side up, and then lay your fussy cut word right side down on top of it. Initially you line up that center point on those little dots, and then you line up the left and right side angles on each side of that pieced section. Okay, let's stitch it. Now my word is quite tight in this space, so I first did a line of basting stitch just to check the placement. And that looks good. So I'll run another line of stitching on top of the basting stitch in a regular short stitch length. Brilliant! Now all that's left is to finish piecing the rest of the thimble and then our block is done. Yep, I am happy with that one. Love how the colours pop, and I love the word stitch against the little cross stitches in the background. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, or subscribe to my channel to be kept in the loop for future tutorials. Thanks everyone!